I saw a huge patch of seaweed coming up the bay being about, 20 metres from me, big dark patch.
Mm-hmm.
So at first, is it a big shark? Is it perhaps a huge manta ray?
Mm-hmm.
And it kept coming towards me. And then it was going to pass under me right next to the rock.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched and I just went, oh my God.
That's Derek Hynd. I'm Jamie Brisick, and this is Soundings, brought to you by the Surfer's Journal. The Journal is a member-supported publication made possible by sponsorship from Costa Sunglasses, FCS, Finisterre, Howler Brothers, Patagonia, Rainbow Sandals, Vans, and Yeti. More like a book than a magazine, the Journal delivers 136 pages of independent storytelling every 8 weeks, covering the people, culture, travel, and art of surfing. To learn more and to subscribe, please visit surfersjournal.com. This episode of Soundings is presented by Costa Sunglasses. If you're anything like me and you spend lots of time around the water, then you know just how important it is to have a good pair of shades. And since 1983, when a group of intrepid outdoorsmen set out to make sunglasses that could stand up to the harsh environments they regularly encountered, Costa remains the choice in eyewear among those committed to life on the water. So whether you're diving in, climbing aboard, suiting up, sliding one, leaning back, or all the above, head to costadelmar.com to grab your pair and to see what's out there. I first met Derek Hynd in 1986 on what was my first trip to Australia. His reputation preceded him. I knew he'd been a top 10 ranked pro. I knew that he'd lost his eye while competing in the 1980 Gunston 500 in Durban, South Africa. I'd read his pieces in Surfer, Tracks, and Surfing World. He wrote a column for the latter titled Hindsight. Alongside his byline was a cycloptic eye. I knew that he coached the Billabong team and worked a lot with Aki. We became fast friends. Derek was smart, strange, bookish, totally original. He'd retired from competition after the 1982 season, but he still tore it up, loose, wiry, knock-kneed, something like Mick Jagger on a surfboard. In the late 1980s, Derek started coaching the Ripcurl team. I was a member. I vividly recall his notepad, in which he'd record waves as such: Cuddy, Rio, Cuddy, Float, Rio, etc. It was reminiscent of the kapows, zaps, and booms of superhero comic books. He had his own scoring system: good, good plus, very good plus, excellent. Here's a story. Derek had been retired from competition for about 6 years, or so I thought. At one of the late 80s Margaret River Pros, the waves were firing. Derek was surfing brilliantly and decided last minute to enter the contest. He blitzed through his first heat. I remember thinking, Derek could win this thing. And then, of course, we found ourselves in the same heat. About halfway through that heat, sitting side by side, scanning the horizon, a big, thick wave rose up. I heard Derek say, "Give me this wave and I'll buy you 15 beers." It was the 15 part that got me. Why 15 and not, say, 12? As I was thinking about that, Derek snagged the wave. In 1992, after a recession and subsequent dip in the surf industry, and in what I saw as a collective existential crisis in the surf tribe, Derek came up with The Search, Ripcurl's brilliant ad campaign, which took full advantage of Tom Curren, who'd recently stepped off the pro tour. Around this time, Derek bought a prime plot of land at Jeffreys Bay and built an architectural marvel of a house looking straight out to Supertubes. There was a steep slide that dropped from the second story into the living room. There was an extensive quiver of vintage boards. Derek used the long, machine-perfect rights of J-Bay to test pilot them. I thought of it as a kind of time travel. Ride, say, a 610 Tom Parrish single fin with a Santana song in your head, draw the lines the board wants to draw, and suddenly it's 1974. Design experimentation led Derek to or FFFF, or Far Field Free Friction, aka Finless surfing. There was a clip that dropped in around 2011 with Derek spinning, sliding, riding backwards, sideways, whipping languorous 360s and furious series of 360s across J-Bay's walls. It was so full of play and joy. I thought, Derek's 54 and he's doing the best surfing he's ever done. When I caught up with him recently in Byron Bay, Derek's newest obsession was mat riding. We spoke at our friend Kane Skinner's place, who lives right near the pass, which Derek dawn patrols most every morning. Fresh out of the water, hair still wet, Derek sat on the sofa alongside his cattle dog, Bungle Bungle. Derek speaks with not just his hands, but his entire body. He's animated, mime-like. His face gets real intense, as if inhabiting the thing he's trying to describe. Derek, welcome to the show.
Thanks, James. Jim, Jamie, what do I call you?
No, you can call me anything you like, actually.
I think I like Jim today.
Okay, we'll go with Jim.
Kind of got that Star Trek feel.
Yes. 10 years ago I was here. You were riding friction-free, and I thought I'm just going to jump on the friction-free with Derek, and you provided me a board, and we did that, and it was so inspiring. This time I went mat riding with you the other day, and it was very difficult. But what brought you to the mat?
Well, it is difficult, which is the great thing, until you get given the key to the city, and all of a sudden someone will give you a little nudge and go, have you tried this method? Mm-hmm. And the miracle unfolds. You had a good first ride, which
I did.
I never had. I had 2 mornings that were the most humbling surfing experiences I've had since before the age of 12. Mm-hmm. I mean, big surf, tiny shitty surf, getting smashed in a heat. Nothing compared to the humbling experience of a mat, being unable to even get to shore on a foamer.
Yeah, I mean, it almost wants to pop out of your belly. It doesn't want you to lay on it. But...
Oh, and you turn around wondering, did anyone see that?
Yes, yeah.
Midway through the second morning, out at the wave we were at, I seriously looked at the outer rock, which is the normal takeoff spot. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm 50 meters away from the outer rock, and all of a sudden, I'm 11 and a half years old again. I felt 11 and a half, completely inadequate, unable to swim. Of course, in the great age of no leashes. And I mused to myself, I shall never be able to paddle out where the guys take off, and the girls on the outside rock. And I was marveling at them as surfers like I'd never marveled at surfers before, because I was sure, I was positive that I was going to defeat my failure, come what may. Mm-hmm. And then a Welsh guy living in Australia, Andy, simply said, just try this. And the next wave was the greatest miracle I've ever had in surfing. Mm. I was as ecstatic then as I was when I was age 12 at Newport Beach, and I paddled out the back for the first time. Unable to swim, but I paddled out the back and caught one because I couldn't wait to go in and tell my older brother Rod what I'd just done. Achievement. And there hasn't been one day where I haven't felt like I did when I was 12 years old.
That's so beautiful, Derek, because I remember, I think it was probably around the time that you had a home on the point at Jeffreys Bay. Andrew Kidman made Litmus, and it was a kind of portrait of your life there and the boards you were riding. And I remember kind of, digesting all that and thinking to myself, Derek is almost time traveling with these surfboards. He's riding these sort of important designs throughout surfboard design history, and with each one, you almost tap that time. At least I do. When I think about them, and I think of a single fin from the 70s, and then suddenly the music comes in, and it's music from the 70s, and it all fills in. All the various sensorial elements fill in and bring you to that time. But it's interesting, the idea of the mat, because the other day when I was out there, I was thinking Derek's almost kind of driving up the birth canal to the very seed of the shortboard revolution with this mat and George Greenough, et cetera, et cetera.
With Litmus, Kidman Frank did about 2.5 hours of audio. Most of it appeared in a special magazine that Kidman did. In that stream of consciousness, I describe exactly what you've just said. How when anyone is, say, on song, they're kind of locked in a vortex where it's almost preordained what they're about to experience. They're traveling through a tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
It's not too far removed from what you said. I stand greatly benefited because of where I grew up in Newport in Sydney.
Mm-hmm.
Midway between the biggest thug fest in surfing, being North Narrabeen, and the biggest hippie fest in surfing, being Whale Beach. So we were all exposed to two different appreciations of surfing, distinctly two different types of surfboard designs,
mm-hmm.
being still the heyday of backyard board building.
Mm-hmm.
And as well, the attitudes were so remarkable in how to appreciate a wave. Most definitely north of Newport was not rip, tear and lacerate, although Ronnie Bazzelli certainly had that capacity up at Avalon.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, down at Narrabeen, you arguably had the greatest array of 8 surfers on the planet, including the surfers at the time on the North Shore of Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
No surfer rode the same board at either beach. The differences were subtle but profound that allowed separate styles to develop. So there was no question of how a surfer growing up really wanted to surf.
Mm-hmm.
You'd look at your heroes, or look at those who inspired you, and not necessarily think, I'm going to surf like that person, but you would want to at least go to the backyard shaper who built that particular surfboard of the person you appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
When it came time for litmus, given that I'd been writing for a number of years and meeting a lot of people, I realised, without going into 3,000 words, that I had a Tom Parrish under my arm. And all of a sudden I was breaking all the rules that Terry Fitzgerald delivered to me. The rules being, enjoy the wipeouts on a hard-edged downrailer at Sunset Beach. Fitzy's great catch cry being, why would you want to ever make every wave you took off on a soft rail board when you could ride the high line on an edge board and risk the worst wipeout of your life?
Mm-hmm.
However, if making it,
Yeah.
have the thrill of your life.
Yep.
I never stopped appreciating that during my contest career. I knew I was missing sections going too fast, but I couldn't be fucked.
Yep.
It was just fun breaking convention.
Yeah.
With the Parrish, the 8.2, I enjoyed some of the best rides of my life, but I knew I was cheating.
Mm-hmm.
It was brilliant to feel the tail sliding out deep in impossibles, but knowing that I could easily get it back together.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the root of that feeling has led to my disgust with the ease of modern surfing since the momentum generation.
Mm-hmm.
The flip nose, the reduced thickness, the lack of drive, the fail-safe mechanisms built into every surfboard, the fucking grip. When Billy McCausland first turned up with his rocket block at North Avalon in about 1984, I marvelled, but I was aghast. What was this going to do to further the conformity that the thruster produced?
Mm-hmm.
And so it came to pass.
Yeah.
The most miraculous shit going on at J-Bay with Felipe Toledo about 4 or 5 seasons ago. Miraculous.
Yeah.
I mean, this was sport. But I wasn't quite sure if it was art.
So I've known you, Derek, since I knew of you long before I met you. And I knew you through Surfing World magazine. And I think at the time you were a pro surfer. I was very young. By the time I met you, you were coaching and you were mostly writing, I guess, for Surfer magazine. But can you talk a little bit about your pro career? And I guess what I'm getting at is as long as I've known you, you've ridden unconventional surfboards and you've surfed in an unconventional manner. When you were a pro surfer and among the top 16 surfers in the world, were you more playing the game at that time?
What you just said before about you being very young, and you reminded me exactly of Gerlach when he invited Greg Day to stay with him for the first time as essentially a 16, 17-year-old. Great times, particularly going into America when there were such a lot of talented kids on the rise. My growth, being that Newport boy I was talking about, had everything to do with riding a Morningstar ultra concaved 6.5 twin fin with very small fins set way back, so that it was like being on a rocket sled. Missing sections, but going far, far, far out onto the face, left or right, with the fins holding, mind you, no slide unless I wanted there to be slide, and then coming in with a huge roundhouse cutback. That was a point of difference. And Terry saw me surfing Narrabeen Alley one day after he'd come back from Hawaii, because he'd never seen me surf much, if ever at all. He was away so much.
Terry Fitzgerald, yep.
Yeah. And this was during Fitz's heyday when I think he'd just won the Hang 10 International. That amazing poster of him on the High Line, shot from Monster Marsh. He basically demanded that I get down to his factory the next morning. And of course, there was Cole Smith, who was also shaping for Tom Curren, but then there was the Sultan of Speed, Terry Fitz, and no one begrudged anything to do with TF at that stage. So I turned up. You know, the first thing he did was he put me back on single fins. He went, "You're all over the shop, but if I can put you on single fins for the better part of 1 year, then I'll put you back on a twin fin that's essentially a reduced version exactly of my Sunset guns." So
what was the idea behind the singles, to kind of get you back drawing the lines that you...
Drawing the lines,
Yeah.
slowing me down,
Yeah.
appreciating sections.
Yeah.
And he built me a 6.5 and a 6.2.
Okay.
Which became the method that I never stopped adapting, which was never ride your favorite board into the ground. Always ride a board you don't really like that much, a little bit bigger, so that with the baseball philosophy, you can swing with 3 bats mucking around.
Yeah.
But when it gets serious, you got the 1 bat. And
Yes.
You've got power.
Yep.
So the same thing applied when the twin fins came along. I had my contest boards in 78, 79, and 80, but I never rode my favorite one into the ground. That was for the serious shit. Essentially, the boards were reasonably true to the Morningstar Cole Smith. However, like I said, they were reduced guns, so that whenever I got on my favorite board, I'd be riding a narrow gun twin fin and almost overpowering it, but holding a line essentially of a single fin. So there was speed, but there was jagged correction.
Yeah.
Whereas your normal twin fin has no jagged correction. It is a slight slide. All power to Terry, because that determined everything. Right up until the other day, when I think I got one of the best waves of my entire life on the mat, because I found myself in position to throw a jagged correction on the perfect wave, where I threw myself into the turn, and on the way through, my fins came up, the flippers came up, whose momentum just forced me further with velocity down the face.
Wow.
And it was only a 3-foot wave, but so similar to the best part of riding a board with fins or without fins.
Yep. As long as I've known you, you've been going for and also articulating beautifully the kind of feelings that we get from boards, and it's very specific feelings that you get from riding a specific equipment on a wave. When you think about your pro surfing career, is there a highlight there? Is there a moment when you thought you were at your peak? Was there something that, is seared indelibly into your brain?
Yeah.
Let's hear it.
Oh, yeah. This is a corker.
Okay.
First wave against Mike Savage, 1980, Bay of Plenty. I was ranked 7 at the time, and after riding my first wave, even though it was a small surf, I knew I was going to be 5th after this heat. With respect to Shane, we had a healthy
Shane
Horan.
Yep.
We had a healthy rivalry, and I just smashed him the heat before. When he'd come in and made a point of going up to Terry Richardson, like my best mate on tour, and said, "I just did in your boy," and Richo said, "DH, I had the pleasure of saying to Horror, nah, mate, he just did you in." So I was on top of the world.
Okay.
Not literally, but my first wave was that good as a small wave on a small day, and I was going so fast at the end of the ride that I couldn't stop. When I flicked off, I had to run onto the bank and keep running, and then I turned around, and that's the last sight I ever had of my eye. That's when the fin went straight through it.
Wow.
That's when I was on the greatest peak of competitive performance that I'll ever have.
And so did the leash? So you lost your eye. So did the leash pull your board? If you were without a leg rope, the board would have stayed.
I turned around as I was still running to pull the urethane leash as it was dug under the water. But I was only in less than a foot of water.
Okay.
I dug in and then flipped back, and I can still remember a flash of orange, which was the deck of the board, the tail.
Yep.
Just the flash as it came at me. And then one of those car crash moments that you've probably had as well. I would have fallen into the water, and it would have taken, half a second to fall backwards into the water. But in that half a second, I had a 1-hour conversation with myself about what I wanted to achieve from now on, whether it was over or whether it wasn't. By the time I hit the water backwards, I was certain that I was going to get that 7th ranking back the next year, whatever it took. Very, very, very positive moment in my life.
So were you rushed to hospital, or did you paddle back out?
Well, I stood up and my arms went up in sheer horror, pain. I don't know how I wasn't knocked out. Warm jelly was going down my left cheek. I didn't know what the warm jelly was, but it was the eyeball fluid. Just as I threw my arms up in the air, Mike Savage took off on his first ride and kippered. He fell off on the takeoff. And my friends, Richo and Scotty and Ted Deerhurst and Steve Wilson, maybe Simon was there, they thought I was showboating. Ha, 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 you've just fallen off. Mm-hmm. So they didn't worry. They thought, oh, he might have hurt himself there. Mm-hmm. Oh, no, he's just being a wanker. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, he's paddling back out. Mm. So I paddled back out, and I paddled wide, and I came at Paul Nordy, who was the water photographer for Zigzag, the owner of Zigzag as well, I think, co-owner. And I passed Nordy. I don't know if he saw me, but Sav saw me coming at him. Mm-hmm. From the look on his face, it really was like a frozen human being looking at a great white coming at him.
Jeez.
And in the great spirit of man-on-man, no-holds-bar surfing, I sat on the nicest guy in surfing for about 9 minutes. I just sat on him and made poor, nice Sav look at me and look at me and look at me. Now, at that stage, Durban was one of the greatest shark attack spots on the planet. Mm-hmm. Nordy was flipping out. He had a job to do, but not at the cost of his own life.
Yeah.
So he started politely asking me, and then begging me, and then getting really shirty with me. Not necessarily out of self-interest. Mm-hmm. It dawned on him that I was seriously fucked up. Certainly I would have won that heat if I'd stayed on Sav, because he may have taken off, but he would have got half a point every turn.
Yeah.
He was just, his head wasn't there. And it took Sav until about 3 minutes before the end of the heat to recover his composure and get the wave to get past me. But to answer your question, I did go to hospital, but under my own terms, I wanted time to compose myself in the competitors area, and as I was walking up the beach, firstly, Mark Price's father, who was a doctor, examined me. And then I was walking through the thick crowd, as you know, the Bay of Plenty had back then, hard to move. And I guess it was one of my only great punk statement, but there were two lovers, teenage lovers, in sheer white fashionista outfits. You know, they would have been about 17, 18, holding hands in front of me. I politely said, "Excuse me," but they were lost in their love. "Excuse me," lost in their love. And then I smiled to myself, which probably helped in the next few hours when I went through hell in hospital. And with long hair, I just started shaking my hair as hard as I could, and I watched a swathe of Jackson Pollock go right over the back of their shirts.
No kidding, Derek.
Oh, it was incredible.
Wow.
Just wonderful stuff.
So it was the blood coming off your
Blood
eye?
and shit.
Wow.
Oh, it was so much. It helped me so much. Because by the time I got into the competitors area, I told everyone to, fuck off out of there. And then, I forget who took me to hospital, but someone drove me to hospital. It may even have been Peter Burness.
Okay.
And then they left me in there for 4 hours without treatment. And I went into shock on my own upstairs, and my tongue was so thick I almost choked to death. And luckily someone came in.
Wow. I think I first became aware of you through Surfing World magazine, and you had, I want to say, like a column in each issue, and it was called Hindsight, Hynd, of course. And there was a kind of logo for it, and it was like a cycloptic eye. It was a single eye, which was obviously referencing the fact that you had one eye. And the pieces were so damn engaging, and in fact, they inspired me so much and made me aware of language in a way that I never was at that time. But what I want to ask you is, it must have been very emotional. It must have been very difficult losing an eye.
That logo was done by Hugh McLeod, by the way. Such a great graphic artist. Emotionally difficult? No. Not one bit. It could have been. Tom Carroll's best friend, Tom being 4 or 5 years younger than me, was Michael Twemlow. Now, there are two comedic, cynical bastards that I've ever met that you never want to get on the wrong side of. One is Gary Green, and one is Michael Twemlow. Now, Twemlow was then a little ratbag, and after about 10 days, knowing that I'd never see again, I went for my first surf at Newport Peak. Talk about mat riding being difficult. This wasn't even a humbling experience. This was just point blank the end of my surfing life, because there was zero depth of perception. I was paddling for waves and attempting to stand before the wave had even come to me. I was eventually getting up, as would a beginner surfer, a real beginner surfer. Now, Twemlow thought this was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. He'd been waiting to get me for several years because I'd run Newport Plus, which had a heavy reputation by 1980. And Twemlow was one of the top 8 members of the team. Yet I treated him harshly, deservedly so. I mean, if you go to the cake shop, Tom included, if they go to the cake shop before their heat and come back with a full belly, tough shit. Anyway, Michael was getting me back big time, to the point where I got that zeroed in on Twemlow's asshole attitude, I got my depth of perception back. And after 45 minutes, Bill McCauslane was who invented Gorilla Grip and the FCS deck grip, Rocket Block and Gorilla Grip. He happened to be on the beach, and he snapped a photo of me going left. That's still one of the best shots I've ever seen of myself on a left-hander. Absolutely incredible shot. So I went in thinking, if not for Michael Twemlow, it'd all be over. And I still think that to this day. And periodically I still message him and say, mate, if you weren't such an asshole, I'd be up shit creek.
So you think it's an interesting one, because thinking about the sort of the grommet hazing and the kind of the codes of that time that you grew up in with Newport Plus, you think it was sort of that not allowing you to internalize this dramatic thing that happened to you and just sort of staying on the level with it, not allowing it to grow into a problem. It was as if Twemlow sort of slapped you out of any of that.
I don't think you need to overthink this, Jim, because we're still talking about the post-punk period where it was basically straight to the point with whatever you wanted to say. I wanted there to be a way back in. There was no hazing at Newport. It was just very hard competition, cruel competition. I mean, Gary Green got laughed off the beach in a junior event against North Narrabeen because he didn't know where the peak rock was, coming from having been a Cronulla guy now living at Newport. So that's when he ended up on the Gold Coast and then came back unbeatable. If you call that hazing, well, that was about the farthest extent of it.
Right. So I met you 1986 was my first trip to Australia. I met you during this time. And then I was on tour through the late 80s into the early 90s. You and I were close pals. And then there was the Search Ripcurl period with Tom Curren, the films made with Sonny Miller, etc. Thinking about all this and up to the present day, what's been the most spectacular surfing you've ever seen, Derek?
Tom Curren first ride. Actually, it was his second ride. It was a flick off on his first ride because someone was burning him, and it was in and out. And because it was in and out, the trajectory of him flicking off had him paddling away from the knuckleheads to the wider second wave of the set. And as he only took off and flicked off, it was still the outside peak. Magnificent. That cut down he does.
Yeah, the cut down. I've watched that wave many times. Jeffrey's Bay.
That's what I was thinking on the map wave the other day. Oh, current cut down. Fantastic.
What was it about that wave that of all the surfing that we've seen, why was that wave so masterful?
Style, positioning, power, virgin surfboard that he'd never before felt, until lifting it up at 2:20 that afternoon to walk down the track of Ari and Sharon Clark's house. Freakish. So much about great surfing has to be the freak moment. You know, a freak moment could be construed as Ross Clark-Jones paddling out behind Mark Richards at the at Monster Waimea on that 7.8 or 7.10 board.
Yep, I think that was the 1986 Billabong Pro, as I remember.
Yeah,
Waimea was big that day.
That was the Bainey, Greeny, not particularly wanting to paddle out.
Yeah,
both being heavy smokers.
Yeah,
which took more courage than actually paddling out to do that. However, with the Clarkey situation, which was completely freaky, taking the second wave of every set, knowing that if he just sits where MR is going to sit, then everything would be great. Things were performance enhanced with Ross Clark, and it doesn't take much to read between the lines. And given general knowledge of that, it throws into massive orbit the question of just which world titles were deserved without being on anything that could be construed as performance enhancing. I've never resiled from wondering who was on it.
Yeah, there was a lot of performance enhancement in the late 80s.
Who was on whatever juice.
Yeah. You've always been strongly anti-drug and alcohol.
Yep. I've always been strongly against that shit because not necessarily alcohol. I mean, 40th birthday almost carked it through too much celebration.
Yeah.
But I haven't had a drink since.
What about, so the greatest wave you've seen was the Tom Curren second wave at J-Bay. What about your own greatest wave? Is there one that stands out?
My greatest wave was not a wave at all. It was 81 bells when the monster wave came around from Point Addis, kilometres away. And I referenced Kaina Point, being able to see a wave because the swell came from so far, you could see the wall already wrapping all the way down to Torquay Beyond, and it just came in. This was my fourth heat against Dane Kealoha, and we both had guns. We were the only two surfers with purpose-built guns. And he had paddled an hour and a half before the heat started just to be sure of getting out. Now, to cut 3,000 words out of the next hour and a half, there we are, sitting out there. There's Dane way out. I'm way out. Nick Carroll is way out. And Gabe Callahan, with 2 minutes to go, is out the back. Not far out the back, but he's desperate for a wave. The wave came at us. Dane saw it coming really fast, turned to me as he went, over the wave before it, which was big, looked at me with wide eyes. Now, we didn't like each other in the water at all. And he just yelled at me, "Outside!" I mean, talk about giving a sucker an even break. He gave me the break. Nick was going to get smashed, and in the heat, Gabe was going to get ultra smashed. The wind was blowing 20 knots offshore, straight offshore, blazing sunshine. People talk about Simon's wave and whatnot and how spectacular it was, but I don't know if they ever got the takeoff. Gabe Callahan ended up catching that wave because he had nothing to lose as the wave stood and stood and stood and didn't pitch. But it pitched right at the end as Nick had paddled through the side of the roof. I'd gone over the lip into the air. Nick's gone through the side 10 metres behind me. And then my greatest wave is the no wave because the three of us turned around with the fierce offshore blasting spray for about 30 seconds. And then we looked at the foam. Gabe hadn't come up. And now we're all going, Jesus, he's dead. And then we've looked above, and by this time of the day, there was a bit of a silhouette. And all we saw was a scene from Zulu, the original Zulu from 1966, with 1,000 people standing in silhouette on the cliff, on the skyline. Every one of them had their arms raised because Gabe had taken that drop and made it.
Wow.
And went through Winky and came in just before uppers. Unbelievable. It leaves everything else in the dust.
Epic. What excites you in surfing these days?
Matt, women riding mats. The equality in performance of males and females is just about exact. The speed, the choice of which airflow to use in the mat, the type of mat ridden in terms of who builds it and what fabric. The woman has been shortchanged in surfing since the shortboard came in 67. Even with the second longboard revolution in California, notionally, you'd think that the women were going to get the easy shot. It's same length board or whatnot, but there was such a culture of performance longboards with flippy rocker, and people wanting to surf like shortboards.
Yes, for sure.
The aggression was arguably worse with these surfers than the worst of the shortboarders. They were taking liberties with both sexes. Come the mat, come the brother and sisterhood of 2, 4, 6 people a wave, where you can be in an amusement park riding a Dodgem car, bashing into each other. That in itself leaves almost 60 years of surfing in the dust for goodwill and fun etiquette.
Yeah. What's most fun about riding a mat?
A conversation with God. Now, if I can elaborate on that.
Please.
Perpetually, I'm wondering what's happening because it's run its own universe. And I don't know what's happening, but it is happening.
Yeah.
When I first realized this about a month in, I thought of a movie. The greatest, arguably the greatest scene in movie history. Deliverance, kid playing banjo. And the Burt Reynolds offsider trying to keep up on rhythm guitar suddenly goes, I can't keep up. I don't know what I'm doing. and then the kid just laughs and goes on his merry way. That's the feeling. It's like a God fabric you're riding.
Yeah.
It's not you doing it.
Yeah.
Some surfboards are like that,
Yeah.
but it's rare because the relative environmental purity of a mat is so good that karmically it feels correct that you can be consistently in an otherworldly moment without taking a drug.
Yeah. When we were out the other day, and I'm a beginner, but I had one good one, and that feeling, the kind of energy transference of the water vibrating into my belly was quite phenomenal. Kind of like body surfing, I get that too, but that feeling of really intimacy with the wave.
Now, when you rode that first wave and somehow made it work, you must have had the same sense that I did, or that I do, about what's happening. Why is this working without me sure what's happening?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. The speed, the kind of almost feeling of rising up. It felt like I was flying.
And how great is it that you completely fucked up your next wave?
Yes.
And went back to square one where I was for 2 full days.
Yes. And even greater that you didn't see my good wave, but you saw me fuck up the second wave. I was telling friends that we did this, and their thought was, oh, riding the mat with the fins, you look like a seal, and there are a lot of sharks in this neighborhood. And then also, I think of Jeffreys Bay, which was very sharky. And as I understand it, when Mick Fanning had that incredible scare several years back in competition at J Bay, you were the first person out in the water after him. Do you think about that stuff at all?
I thought about the danger of what I was about to do, but I also thought about the Swimmer, one of the greatest films of all time, Burt Lancaster in The Swimmer.
Yeah. No.
Oh,
well,
my God.
Yes.
I was a bit like Burt Lancaster in The Swimmer, where I was diving into a pool uninvited. And then I was going to dive into another pool as I paddled further out. My host of the time, Mervyn Herskovitz, wanted just to paddle out and surf the point because he knew that old Merv knew that no one would be surfing for the rest of the day. So I said, well, I'll join you, Merv, because I want to paddle out exactly where the Swimmer got eaten about 2 years before. Only the spleen was left on the rocks one sunny, I think, October morning, a Sunday at 11 o'clock.
Were you around for that?
No.
Okay.
But he'd been a swimmer for 10 years, swimming from the bottom of Albatross all the way past Supertubes, past Boneyards, and into the channel before Magnitubes. And then he'd swim back. And on that day, not only did he swim back, everyone remembers his bald head, but I remember the amount of times he must have pissed and spat in the course of leaving a trail over 10 years. And he got back to the point, which is at the bottom of Supertubes, and he swam in, and he'd left his stuff there. He probably wanted a shorter swim, slightly shorter, and he called his wife. Oh, just to let you know, I'll be fine, darling. I'm back. I'm just going to take one little swim to Albatross, and I'll see you for lunch. Eaten as soon as he got off the rocks. So I wanted to pay homage to this chappie. So I paddled over where he was taken on, admittedly, an 11-foot needle gun. But when Merv stayed and said, I'm not going any further, I'll just ride in here, I kept riding, kept paddling. Not because I, wanted to get out there and show anyone this and that, but because it had been a bad season for surf. I mean, bad. In perspective, 1978 to 1991 was consistently phenomenal. Best wave on the planet. 1991 to 2018 or whatever it was a shadow of its former self, completely inconsistent. I knew from looking at the charts that there was going to be a one-set swell. Every likelihood, a one-set swell. Julian and Mick were out in 3 to 4 foot surf, occasional. But I sensed that there was going to be, during that final, the set of the day, if not the set of the next week. And so it came to pass. I paddled past where those guys had their bingle, bungle, bangle, and kept paddling another 150 metres further out. Remy Peterson at that stage was paddling out at the top gully, and he came out behind me just as that big set came. Bang on time. And I guess that's the wave that Peter King shot, just for a laugh, but it turned into a good wave.
Didn't freak you out?
No, not at all, because I'd had my time with a white at J Bay.
You did?
It was, it was reasonably, this side of Central California, as heavy as an incident could be, because it was a small day. The wind was light onshore. Again, it was 11 a.m. 11 a.m. was my dental appointment, and I was spewing because the wind had only just gone onshore at 5 to 11. And a sudden onshore wind at Jeffreys means bye-bye swell. So I'm waiting in the onshore. I'm the furthest person out. It's only 2 to 3 feet. There's no swell. Now it's about 5 past 11, and I'm really desperate to get in. There's about 8 people further in, also thinking, right, we better go in. And around from Boneyards, a set came, and then 30 metres from me, the set wrapped in, again, only 3 feet. And there was a monster double fin, asleep like a dolphin. That's what it looked like. But it was close to the rocks, cruising. So I'm kind of mesmerised, not freaked out. And it knew exactly what it was doing, to the point where it veered off the bank as I'm turning to paddle for my wave to the dentist. So now I'm paddling for the wave to the dentist, looking at Mr. Noah, and it does a Terry Fitzgerald fade. It fades back into the peak. Now, I'm on the peak, and I think, well, this is interesting. And then it rolls. It rolls. So there's white belly, grey on top, and as it rolls, I see its huge eyeball eyeballing me, and then the membrane goes over its eye. And then I just go, oh, well, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. And I took off, but because it was onshore, the wave crumbled, I fell off. Some guy who couldn't surf very well at all, second in line, was about 30 metres in, and suddenly he's seen the improbable. I've fallen off, and he's going, oh, and you might mention looks like a seal or whatever, but this guy really did look like a wounded seal.
Okay.
And he flailed about, and the shark took him mid-hip.
No kidding.
Yeah, just took him. And it was as if, get off my wave.
Wow.
Now, when I came up, there was no one out there anymore. I just looked at the rocks, and people were just going for their life. Now, I didn't see this chap until I eventually paddled in, because one of my friends, Anthony Wolf, had just got out there, and I told him what had happened, and he said, yeah, well, essentially the shark's gone down to the Gamtoos River because they don't paddle against the current. The essence of the story is my paddle out during the Mick heat was because I knew the shark would normally be by this time down at the Gamtus, which
I
is
see.
a kilometre away.
Uh-huh.
However, this shark had come up the bay. It hadn't come down the bay. It had been made nervous by the sound waves racing at maximum power at Mick and Julian from the loudspeakers. The research, the lifetime research by a lady, I don't know her name, Cape Town's greatest shark expert through her whole career, getting close to retirement, said it's not as much the sense of smell that attracts the white, it's the sound wave, the ripple that they sense. Thus, that's fuel for the ammunition of shut the fuck up in the lineup.
Yep. The guy who got hit near you, what happened to him? Did he make it?
He did make it. I eventually went in. The ambulance was there in the main car park, and I excused myself, but I said, excuse me, but, you know, I was the one on that wave, and I know what's happened. I got to ask, what was it like? And he said, in his Cape Town voice, haven't you been told? I was stopped running halfway into town, blood and guts everywhere, and pulled back. I was running back to Cape Town when I woke up.
Wow. I fondly remember being on tour together with you when you were writing sort of dispatches for Surfer magazine from abroad, and there would be a contest, and then you would have to file that story basically by midnight or 2 a.m. or wherever we were in the world related, and it was to fax off, and you wrote them all longhand. I can still see your script. And I remember talking to you about it. I remember you'd lay on your belly, actually, and you just like bang out the piece in one draft after the event. But you said that sometimes the sort of the flow of your cursive would be linked to like the quality of your prose.
Oh my God, this is similar to the mat. It's no longer you writing. Mm-hmm. There's something writing for you.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
How is that?
Yep. Was writing something always in your life? I mean, I grew up reading your work, and it inspired me in a huge way. And it was interesting because I had, unlike all the other literature that came my way when I was younger, it was documenting a world not only that I loved deeply, but that I knew well. And when I was on tour, what was fascinating was I would watch a contest go down, and then a month later in the magazine, I would read your piece about it. So it was sort of seeing it through your lens and getting to compare and contrast to what I saw.
Yeah, well, I surfed too much and flunked my leaving certificate at high school. And shamed by family and peers, I went back to tech college and nailed it the next year and got into Sydney University into pure maths and economics, funnily enough. But because of economics, there were a lot of assignments, and you had to write, and it couldn't be mumbo jumbo. Mm-hmm. Now, getting to the situation of writing freehand, what you possibly don't remember is that there'd be paper everywhere, because I'd begin and I'd get through a paragraph or two and then scrunch, throw it. Mm-hmm. Because it's just like that movie, The Castle. It's the vibe, man, he says to the judge. It's the vibe, and he wins the case.
Yep.
So, and that's when, after about 10 scrunches, with the pressure building, which you can relate to, you'd get it.
Yep.
And then you'd be away.
Yeah. The vibe is a big one, because I think as long as I've known you, Derek, the vibe has always been there. I remember you describing in the time that you were living at Jeffreys Bay, Mickey Dora walking down with his board, watching the sets, and deciding not to go out because of some vibrational thing. But you've seemed to always be tapping. That seems like part of the art of your life is tapping that vibe. Sense
and sensibility comes into play in choosing when to surf and where to surf. I paddled out at our spot at Byron about 6 years ago, when there was no bank, when it was very deep water. But I wanted just to paddle out because there was a wave breaking on the outside rock that went for about 5 meters, and that was done into deep water. Mm-hmm. As I was sitting out there, I saw a huge patch of seaweed coming up the bay being about, 20 meters from me, big dark patch. Mm-hmm. So at first, is it a big shark? Is it perhaps a huge manta ray? Mm-hmm. And it kept coming towards me. And then it was going to pass under me right next to the rock. Mm-hmm. And I watched and I just went, oh my God. And I counted the stingrays in perfect diamond formation, locked together in the ultimate defensive mechanism. Mm-hmm. I mean, you talk about UFC and how some fighters, their defense is just so magnificently unstoppable, like super high-powered chess. But this diamond formation of stingrays is the most beautiful thing I'll ever see. Mm. All because I paddled out on a 5-meter section, basically to commune.
Wow. When we were going surfing this morning, we pulled up at the unmentionable spot, and we were getting out to surf, and I said, how long do you think you want to surf for? And you said, probably forever.
Oh, this is the first time I've wondered. I thought you meant minutes.
Yes. I love that. I thought you were playing with me, actually. I thought you were taking a kind of small question and making it very large.
Yeah, I'm not that smart. No.
What about, but surfing forever is a great theme here, Derek, because you're doing it. And how do you do it? I know the mat is the buzz for you, but the buzz has never seemed to dull. And as long as I've known you, the buzz has been alive. You seem to me as someone who has placed surfing at the center of your life and never wavered, never questioned. It's been there in the act of writing. It's also been there in the documentation, in the kind of thinking about, in the philosophical sense.
I can only really comment on that by applying the advice Terry Fitzgerald gave me in around 1980 when he thought I was going to have quite a long career in the industry. He said, if you're going to survive, there's one key. Now Terry being extremely erudite, great writer, some of the articles with words you can't even understand. So I'm expecting to receive a monologue. He said, here it is. Just outlast the bastards. So I've been able to deflect notorious subjectivities, sidestep conservative, conformist, easy designs, and not even outlast the bastards, but create pathways where no possible bastard can exist. That's what I found with free friction, and thus far, where I'm heading with on the environmental front, karmically, at least feels like I'm not as much of a bastard as other environmental question marks in surfing. Inquisitiveness, I've never lost. I think it was perhaps justified when I was diagnosed with throat cancer, and people upon hearing this will kind of go, well, why wouldn't you? But I'd never thought of it before. I walked out of the doctor's surgery, and I knew I was in for, this is 6 or 7 years ago, I knew I was in for some heavy chemo and radiation, and with the possibilities not being good. And the first thing I did was I got out of the surgery and I just looked at the ground for the first living creature. And there was an ant. And I've just followed this ant, followed it. And then, finally I've looked up and it's a blue, blue sky. And never had life felt so good. But surfing the past 6 or so months has felt this way every time for the aforementioned reasons.
What's been most meaningful in your life?
Dogs. I greatly respect people who have gone through their life with canines at their side. A life well lived can be gauged by not necessarily should be gauged, by the amount of dogs one might have had through the course of a lifetime. It's pretty basic, Dog, switch the letters.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. Any parting words, Derek?
Yeah. My parting word. 2 words. Spotty bananas. Essential not to eat normal bananas. The alkaline switch of spotty bananas from acidic normal bananas is as healthy for you as a papaya. Spotty bananas.
Great chatting, Derek.
Love your work, Jim.
Soundings is brought to you by the Surfer's Journal and is produced by me, Jamie Brissick, and Jonathan Shiflett. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Our theme song is Give Me a Wave by Oscar Matsumiya and Paz Lenchantin. The Surfer's Journal is a reader-supported publication made possible by sponsorship from Costa Sunglasses, FCS, Finless, Howler Brothers, Patagonia, Rainbow Sandals, Vans, and Yeti. The journal is published bi-monthly. If you haven't done so yet, I encourage you to visit surfersjournal.com and subscribe. This episode of Soundings is presented by Costa Sunglasses, the badge of the explorer. For over 40 years and counting, Costa has remained steadfast in their dedication to not only crafting the most durable, functional, and long-lasting eyewear, but in protecting our waterways and natural resources. Whether you're on the back deck scanning for yellowtail, eyeing a set swinging wide at an empty point, camped out on a bluff at the end of a rotted 2-track, or anywhere and everywhere in between, Costas are built to help you see what's out there. Head over to costadelmar.com today to find just the right pair for you, no matter where the water takes you. Thank you for listening to Soundings, and until next time.